Nashville 2 podcast with your host, Edward Fox.
G'day, viewers and listeners. It's Ed Fox back with another interesting episode, or great episode. Maybe it's going to be great and interesting. That's the goal, right, Doug?
That's correct.
Of Nashville 2. You're Nashville 2. Let's tell your story. So Doug is somebody that was sent to me, and they said, you got to have him on the show. What he's doing is amazing, and you got to get him to tell you all about it. And so Doug's coming on the show, and he is going to tell us about what he does. So, Doug, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ed. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you and your listeners.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. And we even get some views on YouTube occasionally. So, Doug, are you from this area of the country, Middle Tennessee, as we call it?
I am. I grew up in a town just north of Nashville in Goodlettsville. That's where I was born and raised, if you will, and grew up there and have lived in Middle Tennessee all but 3 years of my life when I lived in West Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I just bought into a barbecue restaurant in Goodlettsville called JoJo's Hot Dogs and Barbecue right there on the interstate. And we're looking for a new location. So that's fun. We could talk about that. So my second office was in Goodlettsville when I moved here from Wichita, Kansas. You can probably tell from the accent, you know.
It sounded kind of like a Kansan.
That's right. Well, I learned to say "G'day y'all" when I moved down here, you know. So now I say "G'day all y'all," you know. And my viewers and listeners have heard this before, but the other day I was in a Kroger and I almost ran over a little old lady with a trolley. She said, "Bless your heart," and my wife's from Kansas, and I thought that was actually, you know, I thought that the lady was blessing my heart, and my wife said that's not what that means. So I'm learning, right? The language.
It's a work in progress.
That's right. That's right. So, Doug, you grew up here your whole life. Tell me about your journey that got you, and we'll talk about your business, but tell me about your journey that got you there.
Okay. Well, like I said, I grew up in Goodlettsville. During that time, as a young teenager, my dad worked for the police department as a auxiliary officer, kind of a reserve officer, and it got me around law enforcement and learned to love that profession. So I chose that profession for my career. So as I entered into the world of adulthood and had to make a decision about a career, I chose to go into law enforcement with specifically the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Oh, okay.
So I worked with TBI. I started with them back in 1991 and worked with them up until last year when I retired from there. During my time with TBI, I spent time working in various units and working everything from homicides, sex abuse crimes, public official corruption type stuff, fugitives, just a whole gambit of stuff. TBI is a great place. It's a family. And you have the opportunity to explore and work in different areas throughout your career. I advanced on and go ahead.
So, and I think we forget sometimes, you know, with all the publicity that's out there about law enforcement and stuff, good, bad, and we're not here to talk about that, but we forget it's a life of service, right? I think people forget that people are putting others' needs before theirs all the time. And so there must have been some really rewarding moments in such a long career.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a situation. You're right. It is a thing, a service, if you will. And it's not just you, it's your family, because you end up missing holidays and special events. But it is rewarding from the standpoint of you serve because you want to do something for others, that you want to give back to your community. You want to help people. And in many times you are encountering people during the worst time in their life. They're having the worst thing that's ever happened to them is now in progress, and they're looking for help. They're looking for somebody that can bring some closure, help bring justice, all of those kinds of things. And so it's an opportunity. That's where the reward comes in when you're dealing with somebody who's had the worst thing happen to them and they're a victim or they're a survivor of a victim, and you're able to go out and do something that they cannot do for themselves. You're able to go out, identify the perpetrator, and bring that perpetrator to justice, where at least that family feels like, okay, somebody has been held accountable for what's happened. they couldn't do that for themselves. And so you developed a bond, you develop a relationship with the families, with these victims. And
I would think, and understand, I have not done any of that sort of stuff. I've been business owner since I was 15 and helping people in different ways, right? Solving problems, that same sort of thing. I think most of the people that are out there are all doing things to help other people. I don't think there's as many, we can all be selfish, but I don't think there's many selfish people as the media portrays. I think a lot of people, when I talk to business owners, they all want to help others. They all want to provide a product or a service that solves a problem. And if it doesn't solve a problem, the majority of them don't want to push that product or service. And I think sometimes we get the wrong rep about a lot of different industries. Now, one of the things that's always interested me is I've got friends in the social services, right? They're dealing with children, DCF. I don't know all the initials, right? But making sure that kids are taken care of. And I say, one of my questions to them is, how do you maintain an attitude when you see so many negative things? How do you maintain a positive attitude? And for those of us that are Christians, how do we maintain a positive, godly attitude? So what would be your tips if people are going through struggles and seeing these terrible things that they're dealing with? How were you able to maintain, or maybe you weren't and you came back? How were you being able to keep that positive attitude?
Right. So that's a great question. And it is an issue that the people struggle with. For me, what I would say worked for me and what would be tips is number one, you got to keep your eye on the object at hand, the issue at hand, whatever that is. You cannot let yourself get emotionally involved. You've got to look at it as, I'm here to do something, and what I'm going to do is going to be a tremendous help. So you're looking at the long game, if you will, the end result, not what you're going through right now, I think is one thing. If I know that I'm dealing with something horrible, I know that I've got to be at the top of my game so that ultimately it ends in a satisfactory outcome. The second part, I think you've got to have, you mentioned it from a Christian standpoint, whatever your faith-based is, you've got to have something that is a strong foundation, something that you're connected to, that you can go to in those times where you are alone and you're trying to figure out, I need help. I've got to get this done. I'm struggling here. And
whatever belief system, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to have that strong base, knowing that there is something out there that's bigger than you are, that's greater than you, that you can go to and rely on. For me, I was heavily involved in our church, and other connections along those with people of like faith, like mind, if you will. And so that for me was a huge help in order to make it through those.
Right.
Also, a strong support system from family or friends.
Right. You had. I think we don't see it. My kids were talking the other day, and they're 25, 27, and 30, and they're like, we as 27-year-olds and 30-year-olds, we don't stay in our career. We don't consider that we're going to have a 30-year career. I was just talking to a guy that his dad is 88 and he had 52 years with the same company. We don't see that anymore. So when you when you came to the end, I always think it's interesting. People ask me, when am I going to retire? Well, I'm never going to retire helping people. So I don't know. Does that count as a small business owner? Am I ever going to retire? I don't know. But when you transitioned and you go, and you decided that, okay, this is the time, how did you move into starting this business?
Well, it was a little bit of planning ahead. As I knew that it was coming time for me to step aside, I had been in a position where I was supervising agents and civilian personnel both, and it was time. I think when it's time for you to move on. It comes to you, or at least I did. And leading up to
that's fair enough, because I have businesses that I said, you know what, it's done. Like, let's move on to the next thing. So, okay, I get that.
So in leading up to that point, I did a little bit of planning ahead in that, what do I want to do? The overriding thing that I wanted to be able to do was to continue to give back, to continue to do something that I felt was of value to my community, to my state, whatever, and provide some type of value for what I did. So as I was thinking along those lines, what came to me was this idea of the business that I started, because I knew that the business that I do and going out and working with church security teams, most of the guys and girls who are on church security teams have not had law enforcement experience. Some may have had military, but they've not had situations in their everyday life where they're having to deal with a confrontation or something that could be hostile.
Right. Okay. So let's back it up. Tell us what Sentinel is and what it does, and then go back to where we were at.
Got you. Well, what Sentinel is, we're a company that we go to churches and we take a use of force simulator. So it's kind of the same principle as a airline pilot or an astronaut or maybe an Abrams tank operator, where they have simulators they're going to encounter situations in that simulator that they could encounter in real life, so that they have seen it. If it does happen, they know how to deal with it, or at least be better prepared.
Right.
So what I do is I take a use of force simulator to the churches and set it up, and I put the church security team members through this simulator. It's the exact same equipment that law enforcement uses. I'm just adapting it for the purpose for which I'm using it. And the way it works is the trainee is given basically a scenario. Hey, it's Sunday morning, and there's a couple in the parking lot. Looks like they're arguing or fighting. They're told. So then that's the brief that they're given before the scenario starts. They are then in the simulator. They are presented with that, and they have to interact and deal with that situation. Depending on how they're dealing with that, if they're doing some good things or doing bad things, saying the wrong things, just all of those things combined, the operator of the simulator has the opportunity to alter the scenario midstream based on how that person is doing. So that if they were to do that in real life, if I'm having to deal with you, for example, and maybe you're in an argument with your wife or ex-wife or whatever on a Sunday morning, I'm probably not going to want to walk up to you and take the approach of, look, dude, you need to shut your mouth and leave, anything like that. That's probably not going to be the best way to bring things down. But if I take that approach in the simulator, then the operator of the simulator can say, okay, that's probably not the best. Let's raise it. Let's escalate it. See how they deal with this, So the whole purpose of this is to put these church security team members through these scenarios where they are having to deal with it. And hopefully then, if they do some things wrong, if they make some mistakes, that's okay. It's
because it's happening in the simulation. It's not happening in real life.
Exactly. And then hopefully they will learn from that, so that in real life, if they do encounter an ex-husband and wife arguing, maybe a child custody situation, then, okay, I've seen this before. I know how to do, or at least what not to do, maybe, as I'm dealing with this. So that's the whole concept of this thing. And then after the scenario, each scenario, we have a discussion. We talk about what they did, what they saw, what they heard, those kinds of things, and what could they have done to improve. And it forces them to think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, should they have done it. Many times I found in working with churches, their security teams, if they're getting any training at all, it's going to the range, it's shooting a paper target, and they leave the range. Oh yeah, I can hit the wings off a fly at 25 yards. Well, hopefully that's not every situation that you'd have to use in church. I'd much rather you be able to know maybe how to deal with something and keep from ever getting to that point.
Right. So, right. My goal would be wanting to de-escalate and never having to draw my gun. I'd be more afraid that by not having this sort of training, it sounds good to me. I'm not on any church security team, but shoot, I want to have that training just because I go to networking events and deal with people all the time, that it would be cool to be able to say, I can recognize this situation and I can have the tools on how to de-escalate or deal with it if it is escalating, or know just to get out of the damn way. It's like, do I want to participate? Right. So I'd say you're just starting out. So there's probably majority of churches don't even know this exists, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's correct. I mean, I've been doing this for the last several months. It was a way, like I say, for me to continue to give back and
right.
to serve. I still am in the new stage, if you will. So yeah, there's a lot of churches out there that don't know it exists. I've been fortunate, been blessed. We've been able to go to several churches, and so far, the response that I'm getting from these people who are going through this is all very positive. About the only negative comments that I get is, wish I could spend more time in this,
Right. Well, and I think it's funny because you're almost put yourself in a situation. I've been sales and marketing and business all my life, right? You've been law enforcement, follow the rules, have all these regulations, do all of this. And you've taken yourself out. There was no simulator to get in to learn how to market and sell and podcast and do all this. And so you've really put yourself out there because you believe in this product and what the good that it can do. This isn't a product that teaches people how to shoot people at church. That's not what this is. No, this is teaching security teams how to deal with situations and putting them through scenarios so that they can make hopefully better decisions. So this would be something that I would think that a lot of churches from a litigation point of view would be smart to be able to point to and say, hey, we ran our security teams through this. We do this every year. We do a recap when we add new people. Our guys, that's not to say we're not going to screw up, but we're going to make the best. But to have you come out after 30 years and try and do the sales and marketing and all of this, just from a marketer's perspective, I honor you because you're trying to do what you're teaching others that, hey, if you've got an opportunity to learn this stuff and not have to do it off the cuff, it could save lives. It could protect people. And they just need to wake up to do it because it's not that dang expensive. I mean, not in the cost when we compare it to anything else. The monetary cost is nothing.
Right. And you hit it exactly right. The from the litigation standpoint, there's not just myself, but there's other companies out there that do different types of training.
Right.
Mine is just a little unique, but churches need to be utilizing all of those types of methods, whether it's a classroom setting, whether it's this, all of those things, because at the end of the day, you want to show that you're taking steps. If you're going to provide that security for your local congregation, that you're taking steps to make sure your guys are receiving some type of training on a regular basis to try to minimize injury, death, whatever, not only to the congregation, to the security team members, but also to the individual that may be having a crisis or causing an incident at a church.
Right.
You want everybody to go home safe at the end of the day.
Right.
And so churches to do this, and that's one of the benefits of this thing, is that hopefully people that go through this, they'll take approaches going forth in situations that maybe nobody does get hurt and nobody does lose their life. That's the great
goal.
Yeah, exactly. So from that standpoint, you're exactly right. The churches, by doing this, it just shows another step that they take to provide that kind of training or some kind of training to their people on a regular basis.
So do you have video examples or YouTube videos or stuff on your website that steps through some of the things that you do for people that would be interested?
So what I do on my website, I have a video on there where I talk a little bit about what this is, and I show a couple of snippets. I don't show the entire thing.
Sure.
The scenario, what happens is it's, when they're involved in it, they're interacting with this large screen, life-size screen, and it seems kind of strange at first, but trust me, it gets pretty intense and they get used to it pretty quick.
Well, for those of us that play video games, we're familiar with large screens and immersing ourselves into the action, right? And we all use simulators these days, so it's not out of the norm.
Exactly. So the whole, I'm trying to think of the way to say it. Basically, if they will take the time to do that and go through that, then they're going to get something they're going to get what they need out of this training,
right?
Ideally. And I think, I don't know if that answered your question.
Exactly. And does it ramp up? I would say, just like when I'm playing, whether I'm actually just on my computer screen or I'm on a mobile device, you get your emotions going if you're competing against somebody else. So I would think that this is good training to understand that, like you said, they can shoot at a target all day long and they're not feeling any of the anxiety or all of that pressure. This puts them under a little bit of pressure. And we know that good training can help you be a better driver, be, better whatever, right? By being put through that training. And I would think that that's what you're providing.
And it does. It gets intense. It does put them, when we did this training at TBI. Local law enforcement, does this. TBI would take this training out to them as well. But when you're in this, you are so immersed, because in some scenarios, the person may have a weapon. They may have a knife. They may have a gun. And now they're shooting back. And that you're going home, so to speak, depends on how you deal with this situation. And the heart rate accelerates, the palms get sweaty, all of those things. So the people who go through this, it gets intense for them. It puts the pressure, it adds some stress. But in real life, if I'm dealing with that situation, whatever that situation is, heart rate is going to go up, palms may get sweaty, all of those things. So it's a way to really simulate the real life situation. And like I say, the people who go through it, all the comments have been positive. But I know one scenario, or one church, particularly the guy, he stopped after a scenario, he turned, he put his hands on his knees, and he bent over and he said, "You're going to give me a heart attack." And so I had to make sure he was okay, of course.
Right. But I think so many of us, I think so many people out there, they just don't want to think about it. They just don't want to think about it, put their head in the sand, not worry about it. And that day and age is gone, people. We need to be aware. We need to be cognizant of the fact that anytime, any day, we don't know what's coming. So doing a bit of training and being prepared only makes good sense. I get scared when I walk into a place and they've got all the no guns allowed, nothing, and then I don't see any security. So I'm meant to let down my guard. And I grew up in Australia where guns are banned, and all that sort of stuff. But shoot, we had an incident where they drove a pickup through the front window of a cafe or whatever and, plowed people down. I think we just had a U-Haul incident a few days ago. We don't know what it's going to be. I wouldn't be thinking walking down the sidewalk and think that, a car's going to come up on it and plow me down. But just being more aware of our surroundings. And then in church, I'm not there thinking that something's going to happen. That's why I want my security team to have that training, to be knowledgeable. I may never want to be on the security team.
Right.
There's going to be tons of people that maybe listen to this or watch this that never want to be part of that. They don't want to ever have to deal with it. But let's get the people that have to deal with it trained. I think that's what we all ask, right? Hey, what training have you had? And to say that you're a big church and you've got, anywhere from, even if you've got 30 people, doesn't matter whether you have a 30 people congregation or a 300,000 congregation.
Right.
What are you doing to keep them safe?
Right.
What are you doing?
And these guys and girls that serve on these teams, it's a volunteer. Most churches, unless they're big enough that they have a full-time security director, but even so, their team is typically all volunteers. And you got to give kudos to those people because they're willing to lay down their life potentially,
right?
Worst case scenario, but certainly put themselves in harm's way for the others in the congregation. They're serving and they're willing to do that. So if you are a pastor or the person in charge of the security team at your church, and these people are willing to do this for free,
right?
Then is there an obligation? I would argue there is maybe not a legal obligation, but at least a moral obligation to equip them as best I can. If they're willing to do this, I need to be willing to do that. It's kind of how I look at it.
So have you told me about the guy that realized that the adrenaline stuff got going and that, he joked about doing a heart attack. Any interesting stories since you've been doing this that you might like to share?
Well, I had one situation where a gentleman, it was the scenario, and I'll usually do several scenarios, and I'll usually have at least one where there may be a weapon involved. And this one gentleman, he was in the scenario, and the bad guy, if you will, got the best of him. He turned to me and he said, "Well, in real life, I'd be quicker. I would either dive, get out of the way, I'd get my weapon faster, all of those things." And of course, I'm trying to explain to him that reaction is going to be slower than action. It takes a second of time there that lapses. And he couldn't accept that. He just thought, no, I'm too fast. I'm too good, so to speak. So
I watched a Jean-Claude Van Damme action movie. I know exactly what to do.
Exactly. So I decided to do another scenario. It was a different scenario, but had one of those same options of it would go quick, bad in a quick way. So I did that. And when I did, he lost again. And, he turned to me and he said, "I really can't, can I?" I said, "No, you can't." Yeah. So it's the planning ahead. It's the preparation. It's how you approach. It's all of those kinds of things you've got to be thinking about and looking at. So I thought that was a little bit humorous. I've had different ones. I've had people get so excited in what's going on that I had one person, his weapon was on his right side, and it was a scenario that called. It was an active shooter scenario. And it caught him so off guard, he reached to his left side to draw a weapon. There's nothing there. And so, but the stress, I'll use the word panic. That's probably too strong of a word. But anyway, it caught up with him just that quick. And that's how he reacted. And so, you'll have incidents like that, funny things that'll happen.
So I think there's definitely a need for this. I think you're filling a great gap. What is the best way for people to reach out to you and just to start to investigate how they would engage with you for their church, or maybe do they direct you to their church or direct their pre-church or the security team to you? Would that best work?
And that's probably going to depend on partially the size of the church, because if in a smaller church, usually the pastor is more involved in the day-to-day operation of every facet of the church. Right. Whereas bigger churches, you have administrative pastors or you have directors of security. So depending on the size of the church, the pastors can reach out to me if there is somebody that's over the security and they want to talk first and then turn and present it to the pastor or to the elders or whatever their structure is. That's fine as well. I've got a website. I think you can see my phone number there on
what is Sentinel Training Services.com?
SentinelTrainingServices.com, and the phone is 615-669-0045. So they can, and Sentinel Training Services at Gmail is the email. So
and you will go all over Tennessee?
I'll go anywhere in Tennessee. And the reason why I have gone over into Georgia, but the reason why I focus primarily on Tennessee, after over 30 years of working in law enforcement in Tennessee, I have a better understanding of Tennessee law and kind of what's expected out of the laws. Like you said earlier, the disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I don't give legal advice, but I'm familiar so that when I'm in the scenario and you're doing something, I can pull up the Tennessee law and we can kind of go through it and kind of explain from my experience what that has been, and how that applies and things of that nature. So whether it's the pastor or director of security or whatever, whoever that this falls under their umbrella at the church, they can reach out. I'm happy to come and meet with them, or if we want to do a phone call or a Zoom meeting or whatever.
So basically, any which way that works for them, they can reach out to you and you'll have a conversation. Are there TID packages? Is it pretty much a unanimous type package, or how does that work?
It works based on it's on a group of 5, if you will. What I have found is it takes about an hour to set up the system and about an hour to take down. And I'll spend an hour to an hour and 10 minutes sometimes per person. So it's not a classroom. So if you have 8 people on your security team, then I'm going to be at your church that day for 10 hours.
Yeah.
And So it's structured based on groups of 5, because if I go to Mountain City, Tennessee, which is the furthest east point of Tennessee, and you only have 3 people, I'm going to spend almost 10 hours driving for 3 hours worth of work. And so I have to, this equipment obviously is something that it's a cost of business. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So I decided the best way to try to help with that is to do it in groups of 5. So if a church calls and says, hey, we've got 5 people, then that's tier 1. And depending on where they're at, there's obviously different things that can fluctuate there. If they say I've got 8 people, well, I'm pricing it based, or the tier is based on 6 to 10. So I say, look, find you 2 more people that are considering it, or you're thinking of, or if there's a smaller church across the street or down the road, reach out to them, bring them in, and you guys work together and do it and complete tier 2, if you will, if that makes sense. So
are you doing any presentations where people could come hear you talk about it? Are you doing any trade shows, or maybe I don't know, are you out there anywhere doing like lunch and learns that maybe different churches could come in and sit in as you run them through this? Not the actual training, but talking about why they should look at it. Will those be listed on your website, or are you doing anything right now?
They haven't been listed on the website. I have done a lunch and learn. I'm just starting to get into the trade show aspect and doing that kind of stuff. I have attended a couple of conferences and set up a booth, church, where churches were. I am going around and meeting with various leaders, not just individual leaders of churches, but also leaders of regions and various denominations, to meet with them to start orchestrating meetings where I'm meeting with larger groups of pastors or decision makers, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
From that standpoint.
Okay, so Doug, that sounds like you have a passion for that. You're working on that. I think you're making a difference. So when you're not doing that, what do you do for fun? Tell me what Doug Long likes to do. Where do you hang out? We call these our hidden gems. So people from outside of Nashville, or maybe they've lived in Goodlettsville all their life and they know this stuff, but maybe people from Murfreesboro don't know that there's this cool place to eat, or, tell me a hidden gem or 2.
Well, my wife and I, we have a couple of grandkids, so we love spending time with them. But I guess other than that, we enjoy our motorcycle. We ride the motorcycle. We go all over Tennessee, Southern Kentucky, down into Northern Alabama. It's not uncommon on a Saturday morning for us to leave the house and we get to the end of our street. We don't know where we're going to be that day. The only thing that may be on the agenda is we've heard about a little restaurant in the corner, someplace of some little county that we want to eat at. How we get there is irrelevant. We'll start working our way there one way or the other. And so that's what we do is for fun. It stress. You just out there and you feel the wind. And
so while you've been doing that, so does your wife ride behind you, or do you ride separately? Okay, no. So she whispers in your ear, right, left, right, and you might end up anyway. But exactly. What is something fun that you've come across that surprised you while you've been on one of those rides?
So one of the places that we discovered, and it's especially for grandparents, if I know you're probably a grandparent, but others who are that may be listening, there's a place in Austin, Kentucky, I believe is where it's located. It's called Kenny's Farmhouse, Kenny's Farmhouse Cheese. And what they do, it's a working dairy farm.
Oh, okay.
When you go there, you can see how they make the cheese. They've got all kinds of different cheese, but you get to see how they make it. They also have the cows. It's amazing. These cows, they walk in, they know when they're ready to be milked, and they'll just line up on themselves. Nobody telling them. They line up, they come in, the guys hook it up, and the machines milk it, and it keeps track of how much they give and all that. And they even have a little small, it's not a bed and breakfast, more of a hotel room up above it. So if you wanted to spend the night there, you could do that. But it's a great little place, if you want to take a grandkid to let them see dairy cattle and see how they get milk.
And how far is that from Nashville?
It's probably hour and a half, maybe. Maybe not. Yeah. I mean, it's on a motorcycle. It's not about the time. It's more about the journey. So if we ride 12 hours in a day, we're happy.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So I got a dad joke for you. Did you hear about the cheese factory in France that exploded?
No, I didn't.
All that was left was debris. Sorry, that's the way my mind works. My viewers and my listeners, they're used to it by now, but everything that happens, oh, there's a dad joke for that,
That's funny. But yeah, we find all kinds of places. It mainly seems to center, believe it or not, on food. Occasionally we'll go to some, like there's I think it's down in Lewisburg each year, they have the Fainting Goat Festival.
Fainting goat.
Yeah, there is such a thing as a fainting goat. Yep. It's some type of goats. And so they have a festival about it. So we've been to that, so that's the neat thing. We will look for things online maybe that's going on that's a little offbeat or a little different.
Now, I've heard of this cafe out at Bell Buckle. Is it Bell Buckle Cafe? Have you been out there?
I have.
I like they have all different. Is it the same place that has all the different? I'm sort of like a moon pie fan. That's probably what I weigh. But they have all different flavors of moon pie. So I haven't got down there yet. But
you need to get down there. The restaurant, great food. It's a meat and three type restaurant. But they've got another little store next to it. It's got all kinds of different moon pies that most people don't realize are even out there. I know I did.
Yeah, I didn't realize moon pies were done in Chattanooga. I think it is. Is it? Yeah. So we knocked out one in Kentucky, which doesn't really qualify, but I'll count it. And then we did what was the next one?
The Fainting Goat Festival.
The Fainting Goat Festival in Lewisburg. Which Lewisburg also happens to have 7 cricket fields now. I'm a big cricket guy, bat and ball sport, British baseball. So that's where my Indian friends and Pakistani friends are building cricket fields, and we're all playing cricket. So if you wonder what's going on, it's not something nefarious. We just needed the cheapest land we could find to build cricket fields, and so we're playing cricket down there. So I'll chuck that one in. So give me one more, and we'll call it good.
All right. There's a place down in Summertown. It's a restaurant. It's called Schaefer's Meat Market.
Okay.
And it's been featured on Tennessee Crossroads, if anybody has seen that. But it was started by a gentleman from Texas that he was, from what I understand, he was an attorney by trade and decided that he didn't want to do that anymore. He moved down to Summertown and he started selling and making Texas barbecue, brisket, ribs, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And he ended up opening up a butcher shop. I think early on in his early part of his business, he had enough cattle that he raised to supply his restaurant, but now it's grown so much that he can't do that. He has to buy meat, but he's got a butcher shop there, so you can go in and order special cuts, but you can go around the corner and it's just a little bitty restaurant there, and it is great food. It's Texas barbecue, so it's beef, brisket and the beef ribs and things like that. So there's also, I'll throw one more in real quick.
Oh, bonus. Go.
If you're looking for ice cream, you go to some ice cream places, and if you wanted 2 scoops, it's going to cost you nowadays quite a bit.
Yep.
There's a little place in Waynesboro called Hasty Mart, and it's a gas station. Basically, it's a little market, and they do ice cream there, hand dipped and milkshakes and all that. And I mean, it's piled up, and you wouldn't believe how cheap it is. It's like there's no way they're making money on this.
Right.
So if it's a hot day and you're out in your convertible, or in our case, on a motorcycle, and you want something cool, the Hasty Mart in Waynesboro is a great place to go get ice cream. And you would not pay as much for that as what you would buy, it's not even a half gallon anymore in the stores.
Right.
But
wow.
It's a great little place there too.
It's funny. My kids have just bought it. We're in the process of buying an ice cream shop up in Ohio. My middle child and his wife are living up there, and we were working on that last night. And so I'm diabetic, so it's probably smarter that I stay away from the ice cream. But where is Waynesboro?
It's down in Wayne County. So if you go down 65 south, basically, you come into Lawrenceburg or Lawrence County. It's the one county over to the west. I think it's Highway 64 that'll take you to Waynesboro.
Okay, there you go, folks. That is some great tips. Doug, it's been great having you on the show. I'd like you to come back in a year or so and update us on what's going on, because I'm sure there's things that you will learn, that other people will learn, and things that will continue to grow. I think you're doing a great service, and I applaud you for that. So thank you. And I know marketing and the business side of it isn't the fun side of it, but you're doing great. And so it's been great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
No worries.
This is the Nashville 2 podcast. with your host, Edward Fox.